In this video, we will be covering Chapter 1, Securing the Crime Scene and Crime Scene Safety. So what should be done at the crime scene? Crime scene processing is a very complex process. It involves several steps. You secure a crime scene, record the crime scene, searching for the evidences, collection of the evidences, and cleaning up the crime scene. It takes great attention to detail and nuance to process a crime scene correctly. So step 1, you secure the crime scene. Step 2, observe and document the scene. Step 3, search for evidence with documentation. Step 4, collect, preserve, inventory, and package evidence, maintaining the chain of custody. And 5, submit evidence to crime lab. In this video, we'll be focusing on step 1, securing the crime scene. The first emergency personnel, whether police, fire, EMS, to arrive at the crime scene are known as the first responders. The first responders' first job is to assist any injured person. That is their main focus, and that is what they're required to do. Later, investigators or police officers who go to the scene are responsible for securing the crime scene. They set boundaries, control access with a single path, and protect evidence. They isolate the area with police tape or barricade. All non-essential persons must be kept out of the crime scene to minimize the chance of contamination. Anyone who enters the crime scene has the potential to contaminate the scene and destroy evidence. So we want the minimal amount of disturbance of the crime scene to make sure we get all the evidence. And they also are in charge to safeguard the evidence and minimize contamination. The access must be limited, and any persons found at the scene must be identified, documented, and removed. You can identify and document any persons by taking notes, asking them their name, their address, what they saw, witnesses, suspects, everything like that. So, identifying, establishing, protecting, and securing boundaries. The initial boundaries should be larger than the scene, and it's the responding officer's job. They document all actions and observations as soon as possible, right when they get there, and this is essential for the preservation of information. And they're also in charge of ensuring that physical evidence is not lost, contaminated, or moved. Physical evidence should be preserved for later identification, collection, and submission. Physical evidence includes any and all relevant materials or objects associated with a crime scene, victim, suspect, witness. They're the evidence that you see and you can pick up and that you can analyze at a crime scene. Almost any object can be a piece of physical evidence under the right circumstances. So the significance of physical evidences, they're more reliable than testimonial evidence. They're rooted in science, and through documentation, you can prove the chain of custody and that nothing affected the evidence. It can prove that a crime has been committed, corroborate or refute testimony during the legal proceedings, can link a suspect with a victim or with the crime scene. If there's DNA at the crime scene that matches the suspect, then that physical evidence of DNA links the two together. Can establish the identity of persons associated with a crime, again through DNA or fingerprints. Allow reconstruction of events of a crime through photography and videography. It's a lot easier to reconstruct what happened during a crime and what the crime scene looked like, especially after the crime scene has been cleaned up or is no longer preserved. Physical evidence is the basis of any crime investigation. If you don't have physical evidence, it's going to be very hard to prove crime had been committed in court. It can prove the innocence of wrongly accused persons. A lot of that is DNA evidence. So the Innocence Project goes through cases with DNA evidence, analyzes it, and then not a lot, but there have been cases of inmates being wrongly accused and gotten off because their DNA sample did not match correctly. It can prove the nature and type of crime and prove whether the crime scene is genuine or staged. So when you secure the crime scene, you need to control the access. Once the boundaries of the crime scene have been established, you need to make a path. A single path into and out of the crime scene should be created to help preserve physical evidence. Once the lead investigator arrives at the crime scene, it is their responsibility to direct the investigation, control processing, and recognition of physical evidence. The first task that an investigator has is to evaluate the scene to see if it should be processed for physical evidence. Physical evidence is a very time-consuming and costly process, and physical evidence is usually only collected for serious crimes, like burglary, arson, murder, things like that. So when you go to a crime scene, you need to have correct personal safety. It is very important. Everyone that enters the crime scene needs to follow these common sense rules. Don't eat, drink, or smoke on the crime scene. Do not apply makeup or use bathrooms of the crime scene. Be on guard for biological or chemical hazards. Sometimes they're not always apparent, so you have to be careful and be on guard. Be on guard for sharp objects like hypodermic syringes, razors, broken glass, etc. Never pick up broken glass with your hands. Search confined spaces with a flashlight and mirror. Don't put your hand in a tight space before you have ruled out concealed dangers. Don't stick your hand in a hole without figuring out what is in that hole first. And after contact with any body fluids, you need to decontaminate with either diluted bleach solution or 70% isopropyl alcohol. Personal protective equipment. I know everyone's heard a lot about that the past year, so we all know what PPE stands for. There are always obvious and hidden hazards at a crime scene, and you should never enter a crime scene without approved PPE. So, approved PPE, respirator, it's required if you go into a contaminated area, like a meth lab. A pantsuit, or they call it a bunny suit. It's a disposable synthetic suit, and then it has shoe covers too. You should always have your shoe covers on. And then 2 pairs of gloves to prevent exposure if one tears. If one of your gloves tears, you can take it off and put on another pair over the gloves that are already on your hands. So that way there's no issue with contamination. If your hands are contaminated or your gloves are contaminated and you keep touching other things at the crime scene, now you have contaminated all those other things at the crime scene. PPE is required from OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They require, they are the ones that set out the PPE requirements. Safety glasses or face shield if you think you might encounter droplets of fluid like blood or chemicals. Safety shoes are good to have. You can't go in there with flip-flops. Hearing protection if it's very loud is always good. Chemical and biological crime scenes, you have to have extreme caution when you go in these crime scenes because they can be contaminated with chemicals. You don't know which chemicals. You may not know which chemicals, so you have to be very cautious. A dead animal at the scene may indicate that there's an airborne poison, so you need to have protective inhalation PPE with you, just in case. Make sure you use proper PPE or call in specially trained personnel if needed. For example, a clandestine meth lab, only specially trained personnel can enter the meth lab until dangerous chemicals are removed, and therefore the scene is deemed safe by these trained personnel. HAZCOM, or hazard communication. The hazardous materials identification system are required to properly label chemicals using the diamond label right here, the diamond label. So in this health hazards, is on the left, flammability is on the top, reactivity is on the right, and special information, including PPE, is on the bottom. 0 indicates no danger, and it goes up to 4, which indicates severe danger. So for the example acetone, the health hazards is 1, it's a little danger. Flammability, 3, it's very easy to catch on fire. Reactivity, 0, it doesn't react with anything. And there's no special PPE required for it. Because there's no special PPE does not mean that you shouldn't have any on. You should always have gloves and goggles or glasses and shoe coverings and gloves again, just always gloves and shoe coverings. That way it's not going to say that on the label because that is assumed you already have one. So in summary, the crime scene processing, the process of processing a crime scene is complex and involves lots of steps. And the first step is to secure the crime scene. The first responders and later officers help to secure the crime scene. Physical evidence includes any and all relevant materials or objects associated with the crime scene, including the victim, suspect, or witness. The securing the crime scene helps preserve the physical evidence within the crime scene. After the crime scene is secured, there should be a single path into and out of the area. That way there's less disturbance of physical evidence from people walking all around. There should be one path that everyone follows. Safety. Everyone entering a crime scene needs to follow the same common sense rules. Personal protective equipment is always required, which includes a respirator, disposable suit or bunny suit, shoe covers, gloves, and safety glasses.